I want to help you understand what it actually means to live as a Christian. And anything below that is below God's standard of what a Christian life should look like. So let's start here. Jesus told us in the book of Luke chapter 9, verse 23, he says, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. Let's stop there. A Christian is someone who follows Christ. If you're not following Christ, you're not a Christian, because the definition of Christian is a follower of Jesus Christ. So Jesus is saying, if anyone desires to come after me, if anyone desires to be a Christian, the first thing he must do is deny himself. The second thing he must do is pick up his cross. And then by doing the first two, you can now follow me. So let's take a look at each one individually. Jesus is first saying you have to deny yourself. In other words, you're laying aside your current life, your current ways, your ambitions, your desires, your self. You're laying that aside. Why? So you can follow Jesus. That's the first step. And that is a decision that you make in your heart. Nobody can make that decision for you. That is a decision that you make in your heart. So God has given us free will. And you have free will to choose in your heart that as of today, or, I follow Jesus. I'm letting go of my old life, my current life, my current self, and I'm choosing a life with Jesus. You don't need the full picture beforehand, because the Holy Spirit who dwells in you, he is the one who co-works with you to help you and strengthen you and lead you to actually walk out this new life that you have prior made the decision to walk in. So the first step is to deny yourself, and that is to deny your ego, your will, your ways. Give up your own ways. Why? So that God can do his will through you. Without denying your own will, God cannot do his will through you. And this is why without denying your own will, you cannot follow Jesus. Because a follower of Jesus means someone who walks in his will. Okay, so notice that Jesus denied himself as he was walking all the way to the cross. He could have at any point stopped and said, I don't choose God's will anymore. I choose my will. I want to stop. But he had already prior to that denied himself and made the decision in his heart that at any cost, I deny myself, your will be done. And he said that not my will be done, but your will be done. So that's the first step, to make the decision in your heart. Without denying the self, we cannot come to the second point where Jesus says, pick up your cross. Okay, the cross symbolizes death. Jesus died on the cross. The cross symbolizes sacrifice. He sacrificed his life for ours. His way, his whatever he sacrificed there for us. He suffered for us. He took on the pain for us. He died for us. Can you see the sacrifice? Okay, so that the cross, on the cross, there will always be a cost. It will always cost something. Today, that could look something like, I'm holding this unforgiveness, but because the cross is a sacrifice, I have to forgive and now take on this new way. I have to deny myself of unforgiveness and take on God's way, this new way of forgiveness. You see, you have to make a sacrifice. I have to deny my pride and pick up God's way, which is humility. Can you see the sacrifice? And it's not always easy. Sometimes it can be painful. When let's say you're letting go of unforgiveness, it can be painful because of how they made you feel, because of what they did to you, because they mistreated you, and so on and so forth. And it's painful to forgive the abuser, to forgive those who hurt you, to forgive. But that's what the sacrifice is. I'm making this sacrifice. This is why without denying yourself, making the decision to first deny yourself, you cannot pick up this cross. You cannot make this sacrifice. And this is why first we deny ourselves, make the decision in our hearts to deny ourselves and choose God's way regardless of the cost. And now comes the time to pick up your cross, to actually pay that price. Now comes the cross. Now I have to really forgive and walk in. Now I have to forgive and walk in this forgiveness. I have to let go of the ego, the self. I have to die to that because the cross represents a death. I have to die to myself that wants to hold on to grudge, hold on to pride, hold on to selfish ambition, hold on to me, myself, and I. I'm dying to that. And it's painful. But that's the sacrifice I'm making. Why? Because that's the cost I have to pay. That's the price I have to pay. Why? Because I'm picking up my cross, because I'm carrying my cross. The cross is something that you do every day, not one time. It's a death to the self. The cross requires endurance. It's not something you do once, it's something that you do every day. The cross is going beyond what is convenient so that God's will can be done. It's going beyond what is convenient so the sacrifice can be made. See, the cross symbolizes a sacrifice. In the Old Testament, they would sacrifice animals. And if it was an animal without blemish, the smoke of the animal when they would put it on the altar and burn it, would rise up to God as a sweet smelling aroma. And if it was an acceptable sacrifice, God's fire would come down and consume the sacrifice. Now, if they happen to put a defiled animal on the altar, one with blemish, one which was not pure, the smell of the sacrifice would rise up to God and he would not accept the sacrifice. Well, it's the same today. When the sacrifice that you're making on the altar of your heart, the altar is your heart today. If it's pure, God accepts that sacrifice. And if it's not, he's not accepting the sacrifice. It's like saying, okay, I'm going to forgive and I'm forgiving it, but in your heart it's all grudge and bitterness. Well, that's not a sacrifice, so God's not accepting that. You see? So it requires endurance. It's going beyond what is convenient to become a sacrifice. Present your body as a living sacrifice, the Bible is saying. So it's mercy over judgment. It's excuse me. It's a humility over pride. It's a forgiveness over unforgiveness, and so on and so forth. Mercy over judgment is a sacrifice that you're making. Humility over pride is a sacrifice. You know, selflessness over selfishness is a sacrifice. Can you see these are sacrifices you're making? You know, God, how can I love this person more? God, how can I do your will in this situation? God, how can I be more like your son Jesus in this season of my life? You know, these are sacrifices that you're making. Someone hurts you. Yourself would want to repay evil for evil. That's why you've denied yourself. The first step. That's why you're carrying your cross, the second step. So you're actually now living out, God, how can I love this person like you do? Can you see the sacrifice? Okay. Holy living are continuous sacrifices being offered up to God. Holy living is continuously walking through each day carrying your cross. Holy living. Okay. It will require you, carrying your cross requires you sometimes to do things that you don't want to do. You don't want to forgive that person, but not my will be done but yours. And so I'm going to carry my cross, the burden of that, the heaviness of that, and forgive that person. That's a sacrifice. You see, you've died. The cross represents dying. You've died to the old version of you that says, I don't want to forgive. I don't want to. You've died to that. And you're rising into this new life. Notice after Jesus died on the cross, only then he rose to new life. There's no resurrecting to new life without first dying. Because resurrection means you've risen from dead. So without this dying to your ego, this dying to yourself, you cannot rise up in the power of the Spirit. You cannot rise up into this new life. This new life that is all about God's ways. Forgiveness, love, joy, peace. You know, there's no rising to new life without first dying to the old. This is why we need the cross. A Christian without carrying the cross, I'm sorry, that's not Christianity. Because Christianity is all about the cross. Okay? When God's will and your will cross, you have to die to your will. That God's will may be done. That's the cross. That's the cross. And the third thing Jesus said is follow me. So after you've done the first step, denying yourself, and you're continuously doing the second step, picking up your cross, you can follow Jesus now. But without dying yourself, you can't follow Jesus, because Jesus is saying this way, and the self is saying no, this way. After what they did to me, I don't want to forgive. Can you see? They're opposites. So without denying yourself, you cannot reach to the third step and follow Jesus. Without carrying your cross, which is the second step, you can't follow Jesus, because the life of following Jesus is a life of surrender, is a life of death to the self and life to the spiritual things of God. It's a life of carrying your cross. That's what it means to follow Jesus, and that is what that's what Christianity is. Where do you think Jesus is taking you? To the Father, of course. How can you possibly stand there before the Father with all the self there, with all the ego, with all the pride, with all the me, myself, and I, with all the rebellion, with all the walking in the ways that is not of God? Can you see that the path of Christianity, the path Jesus is taking you to, is a path that leads to your Father? It's a path that leads to holiness. This is why God the Father gives you his Holy Spirit to dwell in you and helps you walk in this way. He's the one who strengthens you to actually walk this sometimes difficult path. And so Jesus says, follow me. In other words, follow me. Do as I'm doing. Walk my way. Follow in my steps. In other words, live out God's plan for your life. If Jesus is walking here and you're walking there, you're not following him. The only way you're going to be able to follow him, if you have the Holy Spirit and you're doing step 1 and step 2 continuously, you're following God's way. Without the cross, there is no following Jesus. Without denying yourself, there is no cross. Without the cross, there is no following Jesus. Can you see why God has placed them in this order? And so the path of Jesus, where he says, follow me, it's a path where you serve. It's a servant heart. The self that you need to deny doesn't want to serve, because the self is all about pride, and pride will never serve, because pride wants to be served. But the path of Jesus, where he says, follow me, it's all about servanthood. It's all about serving. So the life of a Christian is one of serving. It's not one of being served. Jesus is the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and he came down into a world that he created. He left the throne in heaven, came down into a world, was born into a world that he created to serve, not to be served. He even washed his disciples' feet. He came and was mocked, spat on. They blasphemed him. They tried to kill him, and then they did kill him. He carried a heavy cross, Jesus did. And where is he now? At the right hand of the power, at the right hand of God the Father. And he's saying now, follow me. Follow that path. Follow me. He doesn't mean physically die now. He's speaking of spiritual death. And so Jesus says, where I am, my servants will be with me. My servants. So he's calling us servants. So where was Jesus? Well, he was always out there serving. So we need to be with him. We need to be doing exactly that. So we need to be selfless. It's a Christian life is a sacrificial life. A Christian life is to live the way Jesus lived. Is to walk the way Jesus lived. Humble, forgiving, loving, all about his Father's work. That's the Christian life. And through these deaths that we go through every day to make sure that we're walking that path is what it means to follow Jesus. When you walk with Jesus, your life will reflect him. When you're not walking with Jesus, your life does not reflect him. And so life with Jesus is a life of sacrifice, is a life of picking up your cross, is a life of death to the ego.